This podcast is part of the Spoon Podcast Network, home of smart conversations that feed your mind.
What if the way we cultivate and fund our global food system could save us all? I'm Eva Goulbourne, and welcome to Everything But the Carbon Sink, a podcast that delves into the exciting and sometimes messy intersection of food, climate, and the money that could change everything. Here with me today is a good friend, collaborator, co-conspirator, Connie Bowen, who's the founding partner of Farmhand Ventures, which we'll hear a little bit more in a moment. But it's a VC focused on building a better future of work in agriculture, which couldn't be more relevant to where we are right now. So hi, Connie, welcome. And thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I know, I appreciate that. And this is also an extra special episode too, because as I mentioned, Connie is the founding partner of Farmhand, which we'll get into in a moment, where I am a venture partner. So I've had the great pleasure of being able to both learn and support on this unique VC in the ag and labor space over the past year. So I'm looking forward to even learning a little bit more as we go on in this conversation. I do want to start at the beginning of Baby Connie, or maybe not Baby Connie, but I think people always want to know who are you? How did you get into this space, and a little bit of the context of the Connie Bowen.
Sure. Since we can go Baby Connie if you want. I've always been like real food driven. I'm very food motivated.
There we go.
I'm like recording this from my parents' house, so that feels appropriate.
There we go.
Nothing much has changed. I can be like very easily entertained by literally just food. What started with Cheerios, I think.
There we go.
But yeah, I've always really been into food. My dad gardens. My family has a farm in Iowa, though. So like spent a lot of time in the Midwest. As a kid, like doing summers up north, as they say in Minnesota, at the lake with more kind of Midwestern folk, but then grew up in kind of the New York City suburbs. Just have really always been kind of obsessed with food. But then also, I think relatively early in my life, like started to get stressed about climate change. Spent time working at restaurants, almost did kind of the culinary career track instead of college and whatnot. But I think like a lot of kids who are good at math in the suburbs, I was like, oh, well, if I'm good at math, I should go to the best college I can go to and get an engineering degree, which is also incidentally what the people who I worked with at restaurants told me I should do. And I guess kind of that natural intersection is just kind of like this exploring the trends of food and how it's produced. And then I do really like math and engineering stuff. So also designing
comes in handy
and understanding systems. Yeah. And that just kind of led to when I was in college, I was playing a lot with I managed a lot of our garden projects. I like to say that I kind of came from like the crunchy end of ag into like, I guess more, I'm much more tech oriented now, and I have an appreciation for the place of big food. I was building food computers, which are like little mini vertical farms when I was in college, and that kind of got me into startup world. And I got really lucky and ended up like not really knowing what venture capital or entrepreneurship was, but I stumbled into this entrepreneurial fellowship program, stumbled into the Yield Lab very early on. The Yield Lab, based in St. Louis, and now is an international group of funds. But at the time,
can you remind people to what the Yield Lab is?
Yeah, at the time it was a tiny little impact agri-food tech accelerator and venture fund. One of the first agri-tech specific investment firms, and we were kind of trying to figure out how we should define impact across the portfolio. And I was really lucky to be one of the first employees there and get to just kind of get thrown in the deep end, drinking from a fire hose, which is the best way to learn, I think.
I was going to say the best way to learn.
Yeah. I got lucky to spend a lot of time doing that. Watched as venture capital dollars in agri-food tech increased, but didn't see a correspondence in on-farm adoption rates, which felt like a potential problem for our investments, and something that I could learn more about. So left venture to spend some time in real asset, lived in Willamette Valley. I joke I was social distancing before it was cool. And
a good spot to social distance if it was in wine country.
I would say for sure pros and cons. Definitely like I don't know that I would recommend spending your like 24, 25 single years in rural
Okay, yeah.
Oregon. It was like I was having a lot of conversations with my dog, and that was it.
Thank goodness you love your dog.
Yeah, well, she's not really a talker. But yeah, that was really informative. That's kind of where I started to become obsessed with labor. I always, I'd always worked back of house in like restaurants and stuff, so I have this appreciation for kind of manual physical labor, and like I actually like doing it. But I think farming is one of those things that like you don't understand, and farm labor too is one of those things that like you don't know until you know. And so when I was in Oregon, I was both working alongside folks. We were growing a first season ever of hemp, so we were figuring out stuff as we went. So I was involved, and then also supervising crews of folks for like blueberry harvest and stuff, and really just understanding how big of a headache and a challenge labor is, both from the farm management standpoint and also understanding some of my former colleagues' real pain points at work and outside of work, which I'm sure we'll get more into. But I've been pretty obsessed with ag labor and the potential for technology to improve the way that it is done, both for farm operators and owners and for the folks who actually do that work. And started Farmhand like 3 years ago to try to start to tackle that problem.
And thank you for that. And that is sort of a good encapsulated overview of Connie. I'm curious too, from your time in actual agricultural environments, because I think that's one thing that, for better or for worse, is unique in that there's this huge disconnect between people who actually work on farms and touch our food and the people who can influence the investments and a lot of the impact around food. As you were thinking about Farmhand, one, please share with us sort of your thesis behind Farmhand, what it represents, and sort of some of your hopes within this investment fund on some of the more, what I think you're doing is unique, is some of the real, obviously human-centered, but also systemic challenges in investments in agriculture itself.
Yeah, so at Farmhand Ventures, we focus on building and backing startups and founders, enabling a better future of work in agriculture. And so that means effectively we've identified labor as a core critical issue. And so there's, on one end, I think kind of the obvious side of things, which tends to be robotics, automation, software solutions that enable compliance with different types of immigration stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But I also want to be clear on that. I believe that there will be people doing work in fields for the rest of my career. I don't think, and this part of this is informed by, I have a degree in mechanical engineering. Part of this is informed by like understanding technology and the techno-economics of farm operations. But I don't think we're going to have a totally robotic farmed future anytime soon. I think instead we have an opportunity for what I like to call often the next generation of ag equipment to make people's jobs easier and to unlock a lot of the promises of precision agriculture that we've been talking about for like a decade plus now. The other piece is we really look at labor as the bottleneck. So like a lot of times technical solutions, whether that's a new biological input or novel crop or whatever, they don't think about how that thing is going to integrate into the farm operation, and therefore it's kind of dead on arrival in terms of scalability. So that's how we're viewing investments. We invest in pre-seed companies, usually at like 250K checks. We also try to experiment with investment mechanisms beyond just equity, because another thing that I could talk forever about probably is the need for a more diverse capital stack. And obviously, Eva, you and I can geek out on this for ages.
Yes. That'll be part 2 episode for us.
But yeah, and so we Farmhand right now, we're on Fund 1. We're a pretty young firm, and we're trying to, like I think many startups, right, balance a focused approach with a holistic approach, because at the end of the day, systemically, we are trying to ensure that the next generation really of ag technology serves the folks who do the work in agriculture and does so in a way that enables pathways for socioeconomic mobility for farm workers, because that's a better investment.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I want to circle back on something you just said too, because as I'm hearing you right, and just for listeners as well, when we're talking about the future of labor and agriculture and sort of the opportunity of technology in particular, there's what you started with is like reassuring the universe. I don't think robots are going to take over the fields. There will always be a need for humans and human interaction with the food that we grow. But acknowledging that it's objectively, back-breaking work. It is, physically demanding. And as I've heard you share too, even the depending on what you're picking, what you're growing, has a huge impact on your ability and longevity to actually stay in that career. So one, sort of grounding us in the acknowledgement of the laboriousness of working on farms, but then as part of that, so not just replacing the proverbial human with the robot, but enhancing and making it more comfortable, more viable, and more efficient for humans to continue to operate on farms. And so one of the things that you just said too that I want to have you expand upon is, all of these tech solutions, software, hardware, are essentially dead on arrival once they get to the farm. Why does this happen? And how do we sort of solve for that beyond maybe some of the more obvious solutions? Because that seems like definitely one to reinvest in.
Yeah, well, okay. Not all of them. A lot of them, however.
Sure.
As an ag-tech investor, not my portfolio.
Yeah, of course.
No, you have to be an expert to navigate the space. Agriculture is inherently very fragmented. I even within, when I was in Oregon, for example, we had 6 properties in 2 different counties, and so everything was within 20 minutes of each other. Even between the different fields, we had some organic blueberries, some conventional blueberries. And we had different varietals of blueberries in different fields. There's, I can tell you why in that one corner of field A, I'm going to call it, is there's no way we could ever go organic there because it's too wet. And so you've just got too much pest pressure down there. And that also has implications for what types of harvesters you can send down there, right? So anyway, we can get way in the weeds as to why, particularly in specialty crop agriculture or like fruit, veg, nuts, aka it's stuff you eat. Like that is really a pretty diversified space, and so it is difficult to create too much customly engineered and designed stuff on the robotic side, I guess. But then on the broader end of again, not, let's just say totally non-hardware, even types of ag technology is fewer than 1% of Americans have any real access to or any experience working in agriculture. And so it is a good thing that we have folks in cities who don't know anything about agriculture, who are eager to get involved in the food system in some way, trying to design solutions for the space. And also, it doesn't really work well. I call it tech bros fixing the farm. It doesn't really work well to design a product without understanding the system you're designing for and understanding your user base.
Right. Which is not unique to food and ag. That's just good innovation, good business.
Right. It's practical. But what is unique to food and ag, and not completely unique, this is true in some other heavy industries, but you actually need a farm to test your thing for the most part. And farms are expensive. And if, lucky, we still do this thing where it's I can flex that I have a family farm in Iowa. And it's I've done literally nothing for that. We're absentee landowners, but it still gives me street cred in ag rooms. And that's relatively unique to agriculture. But having that access to actually be able to iterate and design in partnership with your end user, that is really limiting in this space. And then it's further limited by the fact that we really oversimplify what we think a farm operation is. And I'm going to say we, meaning the city folk, and I'll put myself in that bucket. And we tend to think that the American farmer is some guy in overalls. Maybe he's a little hipper now. And he's doing it kind of all somehow. And there's just this beautiful, but you've got complex
Yeah, like the
businesses.
romanticized, American farmland.
Yeah, and that's just not reality. I mean, like there's a couple of those incidences, and like those are generally not profitable farm operations. So like so understanding how to navigate the complex business operation hierarchy of a farm is really difficult for someone who doesn't have any experience designing for that space. And you've got all these additional complexities because forever in agriculture, the entire history of civilization, we rely on a class, literally, of folks who tend to do the farm work and do all the manual labor. They tend to have less than full citizenship rights. Again, like we can get way in the weeds of all these things, but you like high level, you've got language barriers. You tend to have educational barriers, and again, you have like right to work barriers. And so that just makes it a lot harder to think about how you're engaging with farm workers versus farm operators, and so that purchaser is quite different than your user. And how do you bridge that gap so that you can actually design something that fits within the farm economics? Yes, which I feel like we've gotten a little better in ag tech at doing, but like we have room for improvement there.
Yeah.
But we haven't gotten better really at all in actually designing for the end user and really understanding what that user wants. Because the one last piece I'd add in here is we talk a lot in like robotics at robotics conferences and stuff about like upskilling farm workers and creating this like ag tech literate workforce. But
Yeah.
a lot of the times we make this baseline assumption that farm workers are like unskilled, and I'm air quoting that, like, which is just so far from the truth. And I think we generally technology completely misses that opportunity, actually, which is, from a capitalistic perspective, it's an exploitable opportunity.
Yeah. And I one want to make sure that we address sort of the unique nature of the humans that we're actually talking about in this, which I think is really important. But before that, back to, as you said, and you and I joke about this together too, basically the ag tech bros, the city slickers who have, essentially the means and desire to transform this system with the complete lack of the nuance and complexity, as you've described, of not only the farm operation itself, and I'm saying that also, in air quotes, as if it's like this singular, romanticized experience, but also the stakeholders that are involved in farm operations, because as we know in many cases too, the operators are not those that even own the land in some cases. Then you've got suppliers of seeds, fertilizer, all the agribusinesses, and then are those who actually purchase the end product. Why is VC, which I guess also then to me sounds like, oh my God, that is a huge investment challenge, but with challenge comes opportunity. What is the value of venture capital in this space, and how's your thinking evolved around venture capital as the specific financial vehicle that you want to use within Farmhand, and maybe some of the evolution of your thought around that as well for for blended capital stacks?
Yeah. Okay. Like a couple of things here. I guess one, ultimately at the end of the day, investment and like all the surrounding jargon therein it's just about aligning shareholders' expectations. Like that's the whole point of all this investment stuff. And it's generally like, if I give you $1, I want however many dollars back, or maybe none.
Right.
But
Yeah.
like, and trying to like probably, and like a fund manager's job is to manage a portfolio that generally kind of aligns those expectations for that fund manager's investors. So that's kind of how I think about things. And also, we have, there's just always various things, like different things are hot at different points in time. And I don't know, it's funny. It feels funny to say venture capital is hot, and it's 2025 now. In 2025, because I feel like it's been
all
kind
the
of
rage.
slog. It's been really a slog on the fund raising standpoint, and like it's gotten more consolidated in the couple top firms. But venture capital is still kind of a cool thing, right? Like it's known, it's understood, and it's necessary in many ways. It's also kind of got the cemented definition now, just based on some things that have been successful in the past and like web era, now AI era kind of investment stuff. And we haven't really taken the time, I think, in some of these, I'm going to say, other investment spaces, which includes but isn't limited to ag, to say, wait, what if we structured this slightly differently? Like maybe we don't copy paste those software investment terms and expectations on this biological thing that has a fundamentally different go-to-market pathway.
Yeah.
So I think we need to just generally do more of that. And like the more people are doing it, the better. And one of the reasons it's particularly important in ag tech, being an ag tech VC and having done like almost 50 investments to date in the space with just equity, right? Normal VC terms, where the average exit size in ag is still in like the 120 million range. We're super reliant on M&A. We had like SPAC attack a couple years ago, and like most of those things are not doing very well if they're still listed. And so it's really, and again, like when you're building things and making investments, the most important thing is the fundamentals of the business. So like when markets were frothy, I think we made some investments in stuff that just never had any real fundamentals, see vertical farming. And I think that there is plenty of opportunity in agriculture for real solutions that solve real problems. It's just that we need to be investing in things that fit within the realities of farm operating budgets, right? And we need to be pragmatic about what service looks like because farms are inherently distributed. And also, farming is a low margin industry, like kind of always has been, probably will continue to be with rare exception. And that's probably a good thing because people should be able to eat affordably, right? But it just means that we have to be really pragmatic about what things fit versus don't fit. And I feel like I'm being high level, so I don't know if we want to get into any examples here. But
yeah, no, that was helpful, and I think and I would love an example in a second, but maybe even just to build on what you were saying before, it seems like there's this education and awareness issue for investors in this space, as well as we've been saying, just in terms of lack of awareness around the nuance of the essence of farming. How much of your work or time is spent on even articulating the value of sort of like why even ag tech in the first place with investors versus trying to advocate for the actual solutions and portfolio companies to make sure that they're able to create these offerings that really solve a meaningful problem, because it does seem like there's still quite a distance between those two players.
I would say, like, and I feel like this is just like general fundraising, not advice. Just kidding. I'm not giving advice.
I take your advice.
In either they're in or they're not, right? We have a problem right now where a lot of like, especially institutional level, or like I'm going to say the regular LPs, and particularly the regular venture capital LPs, who this makes them irregular, who actually consider investing in funds 1 through 3 and or women, which is like not a majority. Those LPs, a lot of them are totally out on ag right now. It's just like you say ag and they're like, no, thank you, which is helpful because no one wastes any time, right?
Yes, and I think that they're like, to even understand why they're so quick to say the no is what's curious to me.
It's because historically ag has not lent good returns, right? Like my best exit in ag is like 8-ish X, which is good. And if you structure your portfolio appropriately, like that could be a fund returner. But in general, and this is where like I also had a side hustle managing a multifamily office that did a lot of LP investing. So like I got to have some insight on like normal coastal VC return stuff, which is so helpful because we're just kind of doing different things, right? We're talking about companies that I don't really like to use the like take a super long time argument in the context of ag. I used to, but generally all of tech actually takes a super long time. like startups take a long time. Like on occasion they don't, and that's exciting and great and fun and good for IRR. But like generally speaking, like you're gonna be in it for a while with any form of startup, and like funds don't get DPI for until like year 6 to 8, depending whose stats you're looking at. So like I think the time bit is a little bit moot, but I think that the reality of what exits have looked like in the ag space is super valid, right? We still talk about Climate Corp as like the $1 billion exit, and it was like technically a little less than $1 billion exit when it got acquired by Monsanto.
But who's counting? Yes.
And like, yeah, it's just me. In like 2013, I think, 14, 13. But so and the other bit of this is a lot of general investors or even climate investors placed bets in two areas that were bubbly in ag. One, indoor farming, which farming is not a venture backable thing. Interesting, there are applications for controlled environment agriculture for sure, but don't expect venture returns on your farm. And then two, cultivated meat or alternative meat stuff, which like some of those things are an extension of the veggie burger aisle, and then the fundamental economics for cultivated meat are proving difficult, let's say.
Yes, yeah.
So people have lost their shirts, right? That's why they're sick of the category. It's hard to argue with that.
Yeah. And you're right too, just in terms of where people have either perceived to have been burned on some of those solutions or ones that they've just deemed to be not as successful as they intended. Before we keep moving on to, again, sort of this human element and some things that are just a few things that are going on in the United States as we speak, I do want an example from you and maybe even from our current portfolio too, of what makes a great investment, what is something that's, appropriate for this certain type of capital stack, and what's attractive, sort of how do you line up all the elements perfectly to make this sort of proverbial optimal investment.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to give two quick examples because I think there's some different things.
Great.
On the equity investable side of things, I'm going to use that also a company that I think illustrates what I mean when I say inclusive collaborative robotics or automation is a company called L5 Automation. And this company is based outside LA. We invested at the same time as a major farm customer of theirs, Good Farms, which is one of the larger strawberry producers in the United States, actually the Americas, also invested in this company. So Alex, the CEO, had the good thought to make sure that he didn't have a strawberry farm, and he knew he'd better spend a bunch of time at the strawberry farm in order to. So what L5 does, is a 2-arm strawberry harvesting robot. There are absolutely applications for 2-arm harvesting outside of strawberries, but we've seen a lot of companies actually come and go in the strawberry harvesting space. As context, farm worker, like if you're a human harvesting strawberries, you probably can do that until you're like 35, maybe 40. Your back is going to be wrecked by that point. So like this is a job, frankly, I don't think people should be doing. I think we can get people out of it. It's also a complicated physical task because like leaves cover the strawberries and then the robot can't see the strawberries. So like you kind of need 2 arms, and that is a non-trivial technical challenge. So yeah, the founder of this company, his previous company is Ast Robotics, so like sending stuff to space. So he's smart and technically savvy. And this is kind of a rare, if you build it, they will come kind of solution. We see a pathway to feasible economics on this. And what's really important is the way that Alex has been designing this and working in the field with his partners at Good Farms. He's been working alongside farm workers who he's actually talking with, and he's trying to essentially design a system that integrates seamlessly into their existing harvest operation and enables their existing workforce to move their talent into higher skill, higher value to the overall farm job. So you can now start, once that robot works, then you can move people into quality control, which is a less bad job physically. It is also starts to enable, particularly on smaller operations, it starts to enable people to move more toward downstream. So I think you were kind of starting to mention this, Eva, but like farms have 8 to 14% of the food dollar, right? And it's all the stuff later on the supply chain that is doing the branding, distribution, marketing, sales, etc.
Yeah.
That
And
is
the
actually
value
pulling
add.
huge portion of all of our food dollars are going towards that.
Right.
And that's part of what keeps farm margins low and part of what makes it difficult for farms to pay to iterate effectively on the way that they're doing things. But that's a solvable problem, actually. If you can start to free up capacity and bandwidth to move further down the supply chain, such that the farm operation actually is moving into more of the packer shipper side of the operation, and you're starting to diversify that space, actually, you can actually pull a higher percentage of food dollar onto that farm operation, creating a win for basically all of these rural economies, actually. So I really see a lot of potential for this next generation of ag equipment, um, that really frees up the existing but limited ag workforce, without just outright displacing folks. So that's one, and that to me is an equity backable investment because there's such extensibility of that technology beyond ag.
Yeah, and I think that's and thank you for that too, because I think that's also a really great example too of it's not this zero sum game of humans versus the machine, and the ability to move around the the people involved in this into less physically taxing but equally valuable positions. You had a second example that I want to make sure that you have time to, and then I have two final questions.
I'll be super quick on this. Is not a portfolio company at present, but there's a lot of opportunity for companies who can be effectively cash cows, but might not be huge venture-backed exits. So one example that I see in this category, and again, like I want to be careful because these companies do raise venture funds; they have to, and you can get venture multiples as long as you don't raise too much money. But there's a company I do some work with that does a lot of work with table grapes. So they basically, again, they're moving table grape. Right now, table grape harvest is totally manual, and people spend about up to 40% of their time pushing wheelbarrows. And it's going to take a really long time to figure out how to autonomously harvest table grapes. I'm going to presume people are going to be doing it for a while, but it's not very hard to move a wheelbarrow up and down a row. And like that's 40% time that folks can get back in a world where a lot of people are paid on a per pound pick basis. That enables workers to make more money. So basically they have a little tiny cheap robot that's like easy to move around, and it just moves wheelbarrows up and down the rows. Like that's it. And what's cool about table grapes, cool and also sometimes problematic, is almost all of US table grapes are produced in 2 counties in California. So you've got this really condensed, actually, market that you can just cash flow off of, and you could have like one headquarter service the entire market, and
it's more
just be a really profitable regional business. And that company might extend beyond table grapes, but that's the kind of investment that I would be more comfortable doing, more of a revenue or redeemable equity based kind of deal, because I see an opportunity for me to get the liquidity that I need on the fund management side, but also to actually create jobs that stay in the region, because some with the like exit stuff, generally the equipment companies are not very focused on specialty crops. And like good example of this is like you saw blue what's it called? Not Bear Flag, but the other one John Deere bought. Blue River, thank you. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Like Blue River got bought a while ago. Initially, they were weeding lettuce, and now it's see and spray for row crops, right, in the Midwest, which is great and interesting and fine. Sucks for the lettuce guys who are still trying to figure out how to weed the lettuce. So I think it would be better for the industry to have alternative exit pathways that enable companies to focus on what are nicher crops today. More niche.
And nicher? More niche. I think is what we're trying to say. But niche here. And yeah, thank you for that too, because I think that's also a good example of using grapes and lettuce and strawberries, as you said, like these are specialty crops, and therefore they're the crops that we actually eat. So we've been thinking about the impact on accessible nutrition, I think is really important, and not, as you've said, to allowing those amazing technologies to then be transferred simply into row crops. Two more questions as we sort of close out this conversation. You are focused, the fund is on the US primarily, then naturally in California, just given how large it is in terms of its how it represents our agricultural system in the US and even in the region. There's a lot going on right now with this new administration, and I almost don't even know how to structure this question, but I think you sort of know where I'm going with this. We have like these sort of a multi-varietal crisis going on here of possible upcoming trade wars with Canada and Mexico. We have a lot of uncertainty around immigration policy, and for those of us working in food, it's almost like laughable to think that this is not going to have a profound negative impact on how food is grown and harvested. What are your thoughts? And maybe even give me some ease here. Because I think everybody has sort of got their hairs up in terms of just trying to understand the implications of the new administration in a variety of ways. Are we going to win? Is there any good news? What do we make of what's going on right now, knowing how critical immigration is to our food system?
There's a lot happening.
Take what you will from that question.
I mean, first of all, the reason no one talks about labor is it's totally, absolutely like a landmine of an issue to talk about politically.
In any industry.
So I'm going to put my foot, but it's so important, it's worth it. And forgive me in advance, I'll put my foot in my mouth a few times probably as I try to speak about this.
That's okay. This is a safe space.
Well, listeners also. But I think a couple things. One, Brooke Rollins just got confirmed pretty easily, which I think we all thought would happen. She's Secretary of Ag. She won't go on record saying she believes in climate change or that it's man-made caused, which is a bummer because when you look at even Farm Journal surveys and stuff, farmers believe in climate change now. So why are we going backwards? So that feels relevant to your podcast group. It's actually less relevant to me. I feel I don't know. I've been talking about stewardship and conservation. I'm cool with navigating that. Actually, no one has ever really been buying anything in agriculture because they were worried about climate. That's not the main driver of anything. So
I think that's fair.
It doesn't matter. Also, if you're investing in something in ag tech that isn't, moving us towards more sustainability, good luck. I think that's dumb. So inherently, all of this ag tech is climate tech, but it's actually kind of bipartisan climate tech that can be put under the guise of higher efficiency. Not the guise, it is literally true, but you could just dress it in a different shirt, I guess.
Right.
But you just kind of dress it up differently and say, okay, we're increasing yield, we're increasing farm operation efficiency, we're increasing water, whatever the thing is. Almost everything that increases the efficiency of a farm operation ties in with sustainability. Then there's the other piece, which I'm paying the most attention to, and I'm maybe not refraining from saying I told you so, is labor. Labor was a problem before COVID. I think we got kind of a little bit more of a light was shown on it during COVID, and everyone was into supply chains for a second. And I think we're going to have that happen again here. I mean, we're definitely, when I'm talking to grower operators, everyone has all sorts of different protocols in place for ice raids, which are anticipated and happening in different places. Obviously, farms are a really clear target for that, as are our processing facilities. No farmer wants that. It's really interesting. I think that oftentimes there's an assumption that you've got big ag is generally tends to be rather conservative, but actually this idea that we need to have immigration pathways for farm workers, totally bipartisan in agriculture. We all agree.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So I am a little frustrated right now that it feels to me again like an opportunity to say, to work on an issue that is bipartisan. If we have immigration reform that doesn't harm individuals, that would be a win, actually. I don't care what administration does it. I am quite worried based on the rhetoric I'm hearing from this current administration, that like that's not the route we're going towards. And there's not, and I think that one other piece, and I'm trying to write something coherent on this that I'll publish in the next couple of weeks, but
Good.
there's basically two pathways here, right? Like it is for sure obvious right now. And again, like talking to some of the biggest producers of leafy greens and berries in the country, they are like, oh shit, we're investing in automation right now. We have to.
Okay.
We are like, there's not a viable
That's the
alternative.
push. Yeah.
That's good in some ways, right? I mean, that's like, should be great for my investment thesis in most ways. But part of the reason that like I started Farmhand when I did is you're seeing more automation. And like, I'm going to use Elon Musk as an example here of like one type of what the future could look like, because there's going to be more dollars thrown at automation. And if you're throwing it at the Elon Musk style thing, you're going to throw it at, one, again, people who don't understand farming really, and these things aren't going to work very well. But
yeah, that feels dangerous.
The idea is going to be, let's fully automate those farms. Let's get the farm workers out of there. We don't need people. And that's a future we could I think we'll see a lot of tech dollars invested towards.
Yeah,
but
and probably trying to support that and challenge the status quo.
Right, and it's going to be confusing. It's interesting because Farmhand is going to get lumped in there in some ways, and sometimes co-invest because a lot of people are going to lack nuance in this space. But the other side of that is actually we have this opportunity for the first time in the history of agriculture, aka civilization, to actually to actually leverage technology to make farm work attractive for the people who do it. We can do that right now. We can stop the drain of farmers are aging out. Farm workers are aging out. Even if we totally didn't have deportation problems, there's all sorts of other reasons that we don't have time to get into that we're going to continue to have this problem on ag labor. So what I'm feeling like is the short-term necessity is let's move dollars towards an intentional space where we're forcing collision between the farm workers who are able to remain in this country and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And the tech companies, because the more intersection we have there, the better off the tech companies will be, and the more likely that the farm workers are going to be able to be part of the next generation of those tech companies, thus enabling socioeconomic mobility for those who want it. And it's not going to be perfect, but we have to push for investments in that direction, or else we're going to go into this kind of robotics, we don't care about those humans future.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. That was cortisol lowering to a certain degree. A bit, about maybe 2 or 3%. But I think that's a really realistic and practical way for us to look at it. As we close out this conversation, now you have this captive audience of a variety of different stakeholders. I'd love to hear from you. Something that you have, something to offer into this community, and something that you need from this community as you continue with Farmhand, and how people can find you and contact you if they want to work with you.
Okay. I think this is almost like a have, give, ask thing. But
love it.
Especially within climate, right? Ag and agrobotics, even a lot of people in climate are I don't really get it. How many gigatons though are you sequestering? And you're the food waste person, so I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to assume you're going to get into food waste in the next episode or something. But crop loss is a huge contributor, right? And the economics of labor are such that we can't afford to get all of the produce, which we literally put chemical and inputs in to grow. We can't get them all out of the fields in an economically feasible way.
Right.
So again, this is another opportunity for this next generation of ag equipment to reduce, to basically enable less food waste. So there's all these different opportunities that for agriculture and ag tech to contribute positively to reducing agriculture's footprint effectively. And again, in a world where we're not really talking about, maybe we don't talk about climate change so much anymore, and we maybe change our language up a little bit, that still exists. Because again, I've not been leading with climate this whole time.
Yeah.
And so
There's
there
some
is
wisdom to
really a
that.
clear opportunity for folks who are trying to invest in climate and trying to do so in a way that is going to yield returns. Invest in agriculture. Like, this is actually a really obvious space to do it, and do it with experts. If it's not me, make sure you've got folks at the table who really understand and have spent time boots on the ground in this space, and that you're asking, what do the users think about this? What do the farmers think about this? And talk to them, because it is a really complex space to invest in. It's a complex space to invest in, and it's also an obvious necessary opportunity to actually get into the project drawdown ag investment stuff. Like, it is the lowest hanging fruit, actually, that we can do in a bipartisan way, even in a world where Trump is president.
Yeah, which I think is comforting too, just in terms of we can adjust it to different priorities and interest. And how can people find you?
I at Connie at farmhandventures.com, or I read my emails sometimes. Just kidding. I try to read them all. Or LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I will actually always reply to cold reach out. But send me a note about why, because that helps me.
Of course, context is everything. Good. Well, Connie, thank you so much for this conversation today and shining some light on both a systemic issue that has very much been embedded in our food and ag system for a long time, and also at a very new moment, as we've discussed, in terms of administration change, and a lot is going to start shifting quite rapidly in this space. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.